Sham Sharadava Nalalida Loka Tranaya Karuna Gana Ganatam Sham Sharadava Nalalida Loka Tranaya Karuna Gana Ganatam Praptasa Kalyana Gunana Vasa Vande Gurashi Charanara Vrindam Praptasa Kalyana Gunana Vasa Vande Gurashi Vande Gurashi Charanara Vrindam Vande Gurashi Charanara Vrindam Charanara Vrindam Vande Gurashi Charanara Mahaprabhu Kirtana Nitya Gita Vaditramadhyam Manasurasena Romanchakam Pasru Tarangavaju Bande Gurashi Charanara Vrindam Shri Vigrara Dana Nityanana Shringaratanama Diramajanado Dana Nityanana Shringaratanama Diramajanado Joktasya Bhaktamsa Niyunjatopi Vande Gurashi Charanara Vrindam Juktasya Bhaktamsa Niyunjatopi Vande Gurashi Charanara Vrindam Chaturvidhashi Bhagavat Prasada Satana Triptan Hari Bhakta Shanga Chaturvidhashi Bhagavat Prasada Satana Triptan Kridvaiva Tripte Bhajata Shadeva Vande Gurashi Charanara Vrindam Kridvaiva Tripte Bhajata Shadeva Shiradhikama Bhavayarapara Madhuralila Gunarupanamna Shiradhikama Madhuralila Gunarupanamna Pratikshana Dhanalolopasya Vande Gurashi Charanara Vrindam Pratikshana Dhanalolopasya Vande Gurashi Ne kunjayo no Ratikeli Siddhai Yayali Bhir Yukti Apekshaniya Nikunjayo Ratikeli Siddhai Yayali Bhir Yukti Tatrati Daksha Ativaravasya Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam. Sakshadharitena Shamastashrashri Ruktastatthava Vyataiva Sadhavi Sakshadharitena Shamastashrashri Ruktastatthava Vyataiva Kintu Prabhaja Priya eva tasya Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam. Vande Guru Shri Yasya Prasada Bhagavat Prasado Yasya Prasada Nagati Kutapi Yasya Prasada Yasya Prasada Dayam Stovam Tasya Yasatrin Sandhyam Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Dayam Stovam Tasya Yasatrin Sandhyam Vande Guru Shri Charanara Dayam Stovam Tasya Yasatrin Sandhyam Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Nama Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Sarasvati Deve Gauravane Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pachatari Shatarine Namaste Sarasvati Deve Gauravane Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pachatari Shatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Nityananda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Shri Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Haribo Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama 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 Hariyaraye Namah Krishna Jadavaye Namah Jadavaye Madhavaye Kesavaye Namah Gopal Govindaram Shri Madhusudan Giridhari Gopinath Madana Mohan Shri Chaitanya Nityananda, Shri Advaita Sita. Hari Guru Vaishnava Bhagavata Gita. Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhattaraguna. Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasaraguna. Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasaraguna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Shri Shri Radha, Nila Madhav Radha, Nila Madhav Radhe. Jaya Jagannath, Jaya Baladeva, Jaya Subhadrama, Jaya Sudarshan Chakra, Jagannath Baladeva. Jaya Sitaram, Jaya Sitaram, Sitaram, Jaya Lakshmana Hanuman. Nitai Gaura Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaura Haribo, Haribo. Haribo, Haribo, Nitai Gaura Pramanandi, Hari Hari Haribo. Jaya Om Vishnupada Paramasa Prabhajika Acharya Suttara Sarashishamat. ISKCON Pratishta Bhiviti Samstapakachara Vaishnava Ceremony. Gaura Priyajana Krishna Prema Bhaktidat. His Divine Grace, Savachana Vinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Parit Pavana Srila Prabhupada Maharaj Ki Jai. Shri Gauriya Guru Varga Patiti Udhari Ki Jai. Shri Rupa Sanatana Bhatta Raghunatha Shri Jiva Gopal Bhatta Dasa Guna Sat Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai. Nama Acharya Shri Haridas Thakur Ji Ki Jai. Jayananta Koti Vaishnavrendi Ki Jai. Prem Se Kahosi Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Dvaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrendi Ki Jai. Jai Param Dayal Se Nityananda Prabhu Ki Jai. Prema Nama Sankirtane Ka Janaka Prema Purushottama Shri Sachinandana Shriman Gauranga Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Gaura Harima Vrana Avatar Ki Jai. Golokera Pramadhana Harinam Sankirtan Yaga Ki Jai. Juga Dharma Hare Krishna Mahamantra Ki Jai. Brihapnidanga Transcendental Book Distribution Seva Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopagopna Radha Kund Syama Kund Giriraj Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Brajabhum Vrindavan Mathurudham Ki Jai. Deloship Shri Shri Radha Nilamadhava Ki Jai. Shri Mayapur Navadvip Eka Chakradham Ki Jai. Paramakaruna Shri Gaur Nitai Ki Jai. Shri Purushottama Kitra Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Shri Shri Jagannath Swami Baladev Prabhu Srimati Subhadra Devi Surasana Chakra Bhagavan Ki Jai. Bhakti Sarva Vigna Vinashana Kanu Shingare Bhagavan Ki Jai. Jaganga Mai Jamuna Mai Ki Jai. Tulsi Maharani Vrindi Devi Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Shri Mathuradharani Ki Jai. Shamavita Bhakta Vrindi Ki Jai. Nitai Gauradi Pramanande. All glory to the assembly bodies. All glory to the assembly bodies. All glory to the assembly bodies. All glories, all glories. Glory to Shri Shri Guru Shri Gauranga.
Namaste Narasimhaya.
Namaste Narasimhaya.
Praladaladaine.
Praladaladaine.
Hiranyakashipurvakshaha.
Hiranyakashipu Bhaksha.
Silatankanakalaye.
Silatankanakalaye.
Ido Narsimha Parato Narsimha.
Ito Nisinga Parato Nisinga.
Yeto yami tato Narsimha.
Jaya Jato Jato Jami Tato Nisinga.
Bahir Narsimha Hridaye Narsimha.
Bahir Nisinga Hridaye Nisinga.
Narasimha Madim Sharanam Prapadye.
Narasimha Madim Sharanam Prapade.
Tava Karakamalabare Nakam Adbhuta Shringa Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanabringam Keshavadrita Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Tava Karakamalabare
Nakam Adbhuta Shringa Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanubingam Kesavadrita Narari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Re Jai Jagadisha Re Jai Jagadisha Re
Keshavadrita Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare
Jaya Kesavadrita Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Re Jai Jagadisha Re Jai Jagadisha Re
Jaya Keshavadrita Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare
Jaya Kesavadrita Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Re Jai Jagadisha Re Jai Jagadisha Re
Jaya Narsimha Dev Jaya Narsimha Dev Jaya Narsimha Dev Jaya Narsimha Dev
Jaya Nrsimhare Jaya Nrsimhare Jaya Nrsimhare Jaya Nrsimhare
Jaya Bhakta Prahlad Jaya Bhakta Prahlad Jaya Bhakta Prahlad Jaya Prahlad Maharaj
Jaya Bhakta Prahlad Bhakta Prahlad Bhakta Prahlad Jaya Prahlad Maharaj
श्री नरसिंहदेव महाभगवान की जय
Jai Shri Vrindayai Tulasibai Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Pradidevi Shatavattaye Namo Namaha. Vrindayai Tulasibai Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Pradidevi Shatavattaye Namo Namaha. Vrindayai Tulasi Devai Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Pradidevi Shatavattaye Namo Namaha. Jai Shrimati Tulasi Maharani Vrinda Devi ki.
Namo Nama Tulasi Krishna Preyasi Namo Nama
Tulasi Krishna Preyasi Namo Namo.
Tulasi Krishna Preyasi Namo Nama
Tulasi Krishna Preyasi Namo Namo.
Radha Krishna Seva Pavo Eya Vilashi
Radha Krishna Seva Pavo Eya Vilasi.
Radha Krishna Seva Pavo Eya Vilasi
Radha Krishna Seva Pavo Eya Vilasi.
Shetomara Shayanaloy Tara Vancha Purnaho
Tomara Sharanana Taravancha Puna.
Kripa Kori Karatare Vrindavanavasi
Tumi kripa kare karatare Vrindavanavasi.
Moraya Vilas Vilas Kunjadiyava
Morae Vilas Vilas Kunje Diyava.
Nayane Heriva Sada Jugala Ruparashi
Aminayane Vibosada Yugala Ruparasi.
Eni Vedana Daro Sakiranugata Koro
Eni Vedana Dhara Shakirayanu Gatakara.
Sevadikara Diye Koro Nijadasi
Sevayade Kara Diye Kara Nijadasi.
Dina Krishna Dase Koi Eye Namoraho
Dina Krishna Dase Koi Eyena Mora.
Shri Radha Govinda Preme Sadayena Basi
Sri Radha Govinda Preme Sadayena Vasi.
Shri Radha Govinda Preme Sada Yena Basi.
Sri Radha Govinda Preme Sada Yena Basi.
Tulasi Krishna Preyasi Namo Namaha.
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 Yani Kani Cha Papani Brahma Jati Kani.
Janika Nisha Papani Brahma Hatyadi Kanisa Tani Tani Prana Santi Pradakshina Pade Pade. Janika Nisha Papani Brahma Hatyadi Kanisa Tani Tani Prana Shanti Pradakshina Pade Pade. Janika Nisha Papani Brahma Hatyadi Kanisa Tani Tani Prana Shanti Pradakshina Pade Pade.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani.
Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani.
Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi.
Jaya Vrinda Devi, Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda.
Nitya Gaura Haribo, 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 Nitya Gaura Haribo.
Nitya Gaura Haribo, 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 Nitya Gaura Haribo. Shri Vrindai Tulasi Devai Priyai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Pradidevi Sattvatai Namo Namaha. Vrindai Tulasi Devai Priyai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Pradidevi Sattvatai Namo Namaha. Brindaye tulasi devai priyaye ke sabha satya Vishnu bhakti prade devi Shatavatai namo namaha. Jai Shrimati Tulasi Maharani Vrinda Devi ki Jai. O Tulasi, beloved Krishna, I bow before you again and again, my desire to obtain the service of Shri Radha and Krishna. Whoever takes shelter of you as wishes fulfilled, bestow your mercy upon him, you make him resident of Vrindavana. My desire is that you also grant me residence pleasure groves of Shri Vrindavan Dham. Thus, within my vision, I would always behold the beautiful pastimes of Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me a follower of Kavit Damsels of Raj. Please give me the privilege of devotional service and make me your own maid servant. This very fallen and lowly servant of Krishna praise. May I always fame and love Shri Radha and Govinda. Shri Mati Tulasi Maharani Vrinda Devi ki jai. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Sikhastakam ki jai. Chaito Darpana Marjana. Sarvatmasnam param param vijayati Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Nam Namakari Vabdha Nija Sarvashakti Tatrapitani Lashane Nirana Vihansi Savartam Bhagavan Manati Durnai Krishna-yajani Anuraga Vinadapi Sunichena Darorapi Sarishnuna Amanina Manadena Kirtaniya Sadahari Nathanam Najanam Nashundarim Savitam Bhagavati Shakamai Mama Janmane Janmanishwari Bhavata Bhakti Rahaitu Ketvai Vainanda Tanuja Kinkanam Paritamam Visame Bhavam Buddha Kripaya Tava Pada Pankaja Sitaduli Sadrisham Vichintaya Nayanam Galara Sudharaya Vadanam Gada Gada Rudaya Gira Pulakari Chitamba Pukada Tavanama Grahane Bhavishyati Yogahitam Nimishena Chakusha Prabhusaitam Sunyahitam Jagat Sarvam Govinda Virahename Aslishabhapadaratam Pinashtamam Adarshanar Marmahatam Karotuva Jata Tathava Vidadhatulam Pato Matpranatastu Saivana Para Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Sikhastakam ki jai. Namo Mahavarannaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namine Gaurate Shri Namaha. Glory to the Shri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart of the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fiery condition of life of repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan moment is the prime benediction for humanity at large because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we're always anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings, and thus you have hundreds and millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names, you have invested with your transcendental energies. They are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness you enable us to easily approach you by holy names, but I'm so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. Once you chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than a straw in the street, one should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotional service, birth after birth. O Son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor. Yet somehow or other I fall in this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. O my Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice stir up and when the hairs of my body stand on end at the recitation of your holy name? O Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I am feeling all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna is my Lord, and he shall remain so even if he handles me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is my worshipful Lord unconditionally. Sri Chaitanya Sastakam Ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vistaya Buddha Namaste Saraswati Devi. There are 10 offenses in matter of chanting the holy name of the Lord that should be avoided. They are as follows. 1.
To blaspheme devotees who dedicate their lives to propagating the holy names of the Lord.
2. To consider names of demigods like Lord Shiva or Lord Rama to be equal to or independent of the name of Lord Vishnu. 3.
To disobey the orders
of the spiritual master. 4. To blaspheme the Vedic literature as a literature pursuant to the Vedic version. 5. To consider the glories of chanting Hare Krishna as imagination. 6.
To give some interpretation on the holy name of the Lord.
7.
To commit sinful activities on the strength of chanting the holy name of the Lord.
8.
To consider the chanting of Hare Krishna as one of the auspicious ritualistic activities which are offered in Vedas as fruit of activities of karma kanda.
9.
To instruct the faithless person about the glories of the holy name.
And 10.
To not have complete faith in the chanting of holy names, and to maintain material attachments even after understanding so many instructions in this matter. It is also an offense to be inattentive while chanting. Every devotee who claims to be a Vaishnava must carefully guard against 10 offenses in order to quickly achieve the desired success. Krishna Prema. Now let us offer our most humble obeisances unto all the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. They are just like desired trees that can fulfill the desires of everyone, and they are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls. Vanchakalpaturabhyascha Kripasindrubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Vaishnava Thakur Ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vishnu Shri Brahma Samiti Ki Jai. Ishwara Parama Krishna Sachitananda Vigraha and Adi Radhi Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam. What? Oh, I'm sorry, yeah. Guru Pranama prayers Ki Jai. Om Aganya Timirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chaksurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manubhistam Sapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Bandeham Shri Guru Shri Jataha Pachakamalan Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahaguna Ragunatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Visakha Nivitam Sa Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Shri Vasuvan Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nivadi Paschatya Desatarine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Namine Shri Vasuvanavi Devi Dayitaya Kripabdaye Krishna Sambandha Vijnana Dayane Prabhave Namaha Madhur Ujjwala Premadya Shri Rupanuga Bhaktida Shri Gora Karuna Shakti Vigrahaya Namostate Namaste Gauravani Shri Murtaye Dinatarine Rupanuga Virudapa Apasiddhanta Dvantaharine Namo Gora Kishoraya Saksaguraki Murtaye Vipralambara Sambode Padam Bujayate Namaha Namo Bhakti Vinodaya Sachitananda Namine Gora Shakti Swarupaya Rupanuga Varayate Guravir Baba Bhumestvam Nirdesta Sajjana Priya Vaishnava Sarvabhuma Sri Jagannathaya Te Namaha Vanchakalpa Turabhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyavicha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahabhanyaya Krishna Premapadayate Krishna Krishna Chaitanya Namne Guritrase Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Saktikam Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Jayatam Suratur Pangur Mama Manda Matir Gati Matsarva Swapadam Bojo Radha Madana Mohano Divya Dvindaranya Kalpadrumadaha Shimad Ratnakara Simasanastito Shimad Radha Shila Govinda Devo Prestali Bihi Sivamana Smarami Shiman Rasara Sarambi Vamsiva Tatatastita Karsan Venuswaner Gopir Gopinatak Striyestuna Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanastute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Brahma Samhita Ki Jai Ishwara Parama Krishna Sachitananda Vigraha Nadiradi Govinda Sarvakarana Kanaram Chintamani Prakara Satma Sukalpa Vriksha Laksa Vrite Susuravi Abhipali Antam Lakshmi Sahasra Satasambrahma Sevyamanam Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Venam Kunanda Madhavinda Dalayataksam Parhavatam Samasitam Buddhasundarangam Kandarpa Koti Kamaniya Vishesha Sobam Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Alola Chandra Kalasadvana Madhya Vamsi Ratnam Gadam Pranayakeli Kalavilasam Shaman Tribanga Lalitan Yita Prakasam Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Angani Yasya Sakilendriya Vritti Manti Pasyanti Panti Kalyanti Chiran Chikanti Ananda Chinmaya Sadujvala Vigrahasya Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Advaita Machutam Anadim Ananta Rupa Madhyam Purana Purisham Navayovanam Cha Vedesa Durlabham Adurlabham Atma Bhakto Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Pantastakoti Satavatsara Sampragamyo Vayor Ratapi Manaso Munipungamanam Sopyasti Yatpa Parisimya Vichintya Tatre Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Ekopya Sora Chaitam Jagaranda Kotim Yas Chakti Rasti Jagaranda Chayaya Danta Andanta Rasta Paramanu Chayanta Rastam Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yat Bhava Bhavita Diyo Manajasta Taiva Samprapya Rupa Mahima Samyanabusa Suktarya Meva Nigama Pratitaistavanti Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmaya Rasa Pratibhavita Bistabirya Evani Jirupa Taya Kalabi Goloka Evani Vasata Kilatma Bhuto Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Premanjana Churita Bhakti Vilochanena Santaksa Deva Desu Vilokayanti Yam Shama Sundaram Achintya Gunaswarupam Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajam Ramadi Murti Sukalani Menatista Nana Avatara Makarod Bhuvanesa Kinta Krishna Swayam Samabhuvat Paramampa Manyo Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yasya Prabhapa Vato Jagranda Koti Koti Swasesha Vasudadi Vibhuti Binam Tad Brahma Niskalamanata Masesha Bhutam Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Mayahi Yasya Jagranda Satani Sute Trigun Yatad Vishaya Veda Vitaya Manam Sadva Valambi Parasatvam Visuddha Sattvam Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmaya Rasat Mataya Manasu Yaprani Nam Pratifilam Smaratamu Petya Lila Yatena Bhuvanani Jaya Yachasram Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Goloka Namni Nijidamni Tale Chatasya Devi Mahesu Haridama Sute 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 Te Prabhava Nichaya Vichasya Yena Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Sististati Pralaya Sada Vasakti Reka Chayeva Yasya Bhuvanani Vibharti Durga Echana Rupam Apyasya Chichesta Tesa Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Siram Yata Dadivikara Visesa Yogat Sanjayate Naita Tapita Kasti Eto Yasambhutam Apyutatasam Davitikara Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Departure Evhita Santanam Abhyupe Saitya, Dipayate Vivita Hetu Sumanu Dharma, Yastadra Geva Hicha Vishnu Taya Vibhati, Govinda Armadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yakarna Narna Vajale Bhajatisma Yoga, Nidramananta Jagadanda Saroma Kupa, Adhara Saktim Avalambya Puram Sahurtim, Govinda Armadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yashaika Niswasit Kalamatavalamya, Jivanti Loma Villaja Jagadanda Nata, Vishnu Mahansa Yasya Kalavi Seso, Govinda Armadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami, Basmanya Tasma Sakaleshan Jason Teja, Swayam Kiyat Prakatayata Pitadvadatra Brahmaya Esa Jagadanda Vidana Karta, Govinda Amadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yatpada Palava Yugambani Dayakumba, Dwande Pranama Samayesa Ganadi Raja Vignan Vihanta Malamasa Jagatrayasya, Govinda Amadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Agni Mahiga Ganamambu Maruti Sascha, Kalas Tatma Manasiti Jagatrayani Yasmad Bhavanti Vibhavanti Visanti Yamcha, Govinda Amadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yaschak Suresa Savita Jaga, Saranam Raja Samasta Samurtira Sesha Teja Yasyagaya Brahmati Sambrita Kala Chakro, Govinda Amadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Dharmo Tapapa Nijaya Sutesta Pamsi, Brahmadi Kita Patakava Desta Jiva Yadata Matra Vibhava Prakita Prabhava, Govinda Amadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yastvendra Gopa Matavendra Mahosva Karma, Bandana Rupa Falabhaja Namata Noti Karmani Nidhati Kintu Chabakti Bhaja, Govinda Amadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yam Kroda Kama Saja Pranayadi Biti, Vatsaya Moha Guru Gora Vasavya Bhava, Sanchinti Tasha Sabrisim Tanamapurete, Govinda Amadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Sriya Kanta Kanta Purusha Kalpatarava, Jumal Bumis Chintamani Ganama Itoyam Amritam, Kataganam Natyam Gamanam Apivansi Priyasta Kichirananda Majuti Puram, Apitada Swadhyam Apicha Sayata Shiradu Bihisravati Surabi Byasti Suman, Nimesar Dakyavava Jitina Hiatripi Samaya Bhaje Switadi Granta Maham, Ihukulakam Itiam, Vidantaste Santak Chiti Virakara Charakati Payev. Guru Vastika prayers Ki Jai. The spiritual master is receiving benediction from the ocean of mercy, just as a cloud pours water on the forest where to extinguish it. So the spiritual master delivers the materially afflicted world by extinguishing the blazing fire of material existence. From my respectful basis, not the lotus feet. Such spiritual master is an ocean of auspicious quality. Chanting the holy name, dancing in ecstasy, singing and playing musical instruments. The spiritual master is always gladdened by the Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Because he is relished in the mellows of pure devotion within his mind, sometimes his hair stands on end. He feels quivering in his body, and tears flow from his eyes like waves off my respectful basis. Unto the lotus feet is such spiritual master. Spiritual master is always engaged in temple worship, Sri Radha and Krishna. He also engages his disciples in such worship. They dress the deities in beautiful clothes and ornaments, clean their temple, and perform other similar worship of the Lord. For my respectful basis, unto the lotus feet is such spiritual master. Spiritual master is always offering Krishna 4 kinds of delicious food, analyzes that which is licked, chewed, drunk, and sucked. When the spiritual master sees that the devotees are satisfied by eating Bhagavad Prasadi, he is satisfied. For my respectful basis, unto the lotus feet is such spiritual master. The spiritual master is always eager to hear and chant about the unlimited conjugal pastimes, Radhika and Madhava, and their qualities, names, and forms. The spiritual master aspires to relish these at every moment. I offer my respectful basis unto the lotus feet is such spiritual master. The spiritual master is very dear because he is expert at discussing gopis at different times with different tastes and arrangements for the perfection of Radha and Krishna's conjugal loving affairs within the groves of Vrindavana. I offer my most humble basis unto the lotus feet is such spiritual master. The spiritual master to be honored as much as Supreme Lord because he is the most confidential servant to the Lord. This is acknowledged in all revealed scriptures and followed by all authorities. Therefore, I offer my respectful basis unto the lotus feet is such spiritual master, who is a bona fide representative of Sri Hare Krishna. By the mercy of the spiritual master, one receives the benediction of Krishna. Without the grace of the spiritual master, one cannot make any advancement. Therefore, I should always remember and praise the spiritual master at least 3 times a day. I store for my respectful basis on the lotus feet of my spiritual master, his divine grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavatam Grantaraja Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Imam Lokam Amum Chaiva. Canto 3, Chapter 3, Verse 21. Imam Lokam Amum Chaiva. Ramayan Sutaram Yadun. Remeshanadaya Data. Shanastri Shanasoridaha. Imam, this, Lokam, earth, Amum, and the other worlds, Cha, also, Eva, certainly, Ramayan, pleasing, Sutaram, specifically, Yadun, the Yadus, Reme, enjoy, Shanadaya, by night, Datta, given by, Shana, leisure, Stri, with women, Shana, conjugal love, Sorida, friendship. Translation by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The Lord enjoyed his pastimes both in this world and in other worlds, higher planets, specifically in the association of the Yadu dynasty. At leisure hours offered by night, he enjoyed the friendship of conjugal love with women. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The Lord enjoyed in this world with his pure devotees, although he is the personality of Godhead and is transcendental to all material attachment. He nevertheless exhibited much attachment for his pure devotees on the earth, as well as for the demigods who engage in his service in the heavenly planets as powerful delegated directors in the management of all material activities. He displayed special attachment for his family members, the Yadus, as well as for his 16,000 wives, who had the opportunity to meet him in the leisure hours of night. All these attachments of the Lord are manifestations of his internal potency, of which the external potency is only a shadow representation. In the Skanda Purana, Prabhasa Skanda, in the topics between Lord Shiva and Gauri, meaning Parvati, there is confirmation of his internal potential manifestations. This is mention of the Lord's meeting with 16,000 cowherd damsels, although he is the Hamsa, transcendental, supersoul, and maintainer of all living entities. The 16,000 cowherd damsels are a display of 16 varieties of internal potencies. This will be more elaborately explained in the 10th canto. It is said there that Lord Krishna is just like the moon, and the internal potential damsels are like the stars around the moon. Jai Srila Prabhupada. The Lord enjoyed his pastimes both in this world and in other worlds, or higher planets, specifically in the association of the Yadu dynasty. At leisure hours offered by night, he enjoyed the friendship of conjugal love with women. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So, these type of descriptions of the Lord cannot be understood by materialistic people. They misinterpret them. And devotees, when they hear these things, they understand it by the statements of Shastra and statements of genuine acharyas. They do not speculate. They don't perform the principle Atmanam Manyate Jagat, projecting their own limited experience on Krishna. They also spend nights with their wife or other women trying to enjoy, but that is not a description of what goes on between Krishna and his wives. Therefore, to understand transcendental pastimes of the Lord performed in his internal potency, one must hear very carefully the explanation of the acharyas. There are many examples like this. Like, for example, in the 7th chapter, there is a description how people misinterpret points. Like, for example, what it says, one second, let me find it. Prabhupada clearly says that we should not express opinions about what we read, but we should repeat what the acharyas have said and what is said by Krishna. For example, it says, Bahunam janmanam ante gyanavam mam prapadyante vasudeva saramiti Samahatma Sadurlabham. After many births and deaths, he who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is. Such a great soul is very rare. And in the purport, Prabhupada says, the living entity, while executing devotional service or transcendental rituals, after many, many births, may actually become situated in transcendental pure knowledge that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the ultimate goal of spiritual realization. You notice he uses the word may. May means it may happen or it may not happen. So, in the beginning of spiritual realization, while one is trying to give up one's attachment to materialism, there is some leaning toward impersonalism. But when one is further advanced, he can understand that there are activities in the spiritual life, and that these activities constitute devotional service. Realizing this, he becomes attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and surrenders unto him. So we can see that some people never reach that conclusion because they become sidetracked by Mayavad philosophy. And Mayavad philosophy is a false interpretation of Krishna's Brahman realization. What's false about the Mayavadi's interpretation? They say there's nothing beyond Brahman. There's no Vaikuntha, there's no Goloka, there's no Krishna, Nanda Maharaj, Yasoda Maya, etc. So, therefore, it's very rare that one becomes a pure devotee of the Lord, because there are many obstacles on that path due to misinterpretations, due to people giving opinion rather than quoting Shastra. So we have to be very careful not to fall into that trap of making opinions based on our imperfect senses and mind. At such a time, one can understand that Lord Sri Krishna, and then it says, there is, in the beginning of spiritual realization, while one is trying to give up one's attachment to materialism, there is some leaning towards impersonalism. But when one is further advanced, he can understand that there are activities in the spiritual life, and that these activities constitute devotional service. The Mayavadis say there's no activity in the highest state of spiritual realization, and there's no individuality also. One has to deny their individuality to merge into Brahman effulgence. So this is all artificial things, and therefore people fall down with this type of philosophy. Actually, it's a false philosophy. It's not real. That's why it's Mayavad. Realizing this, that is, that there are activities in the spiritual life, in the spiritual world, that at such a time, one can understand that Lord Shri Krishna's mercy is everything, and that he is the cause of all causes, and that this material manifestation is not independent from him. He realizes the material world to be a perverted reflection of spiritual variegatedness, and realizes that in everything there is a relationship with the Supreme Lord Krishna. Well, most of Western philosophers are trying to convince us that this is all a bunch of hooey. In other words, this is just people's projection of their imperfect understanding of life, because they're not relying on science and empiricism to understand things. They're bewildered by religious dogmas. This was Karl Marx and Sigmund Freud. They both considered religion an opiate, a drug that mesmerizes people and keeps them chained to dependency on a non-existent God. They are actually very big demons. There's three big demons. There's Darwin, Freud, and Marx. all three of them are atheists, and they actively try and convince people that there's no God. You see? And people have become influenced by them, seriously influenced by them. And they teach these things in the schools. You know, I mean, Prabhupada tells this story that he was on a train in India, and the older trains, they had these compartments where there were seats on two sides, and people would face each other. Have you been in a train like that?
Yeah.
They still have them in India?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
And so he was facing, there was a man and a woman, and they didn't know each other. They were just passengers. But also, all of a sudden they started talking. They were both college educated. So they started talking about, and this is in the 1940s, they started talking about Freud. And they were mentioning the id and the libido and all these terminology that Freud uses. And so they were using all this, you know, Freudian language. And what is Freud all about? The Bhagavad Gita is all about Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Freud is all about sex, you see. For him, sex is God. Even Carl Jung, who was another philosopher and involved in psychoanalysis, he said Freud's problem is he's always talking about sex. He can't talk about anything else. That's his God, right? So these people, this man and woman who were strangers to each other, but they were both had so-called education. Right? In other words, they studied Freud in college. So they were talking about id and this and the libido, which means sex desire and so forth. And at the end, the man said, well, by the way, are you doing anything when you get to your destination? You have any special thing you have to do? And she said, not really. He said, would you like to go out for dinner with me? And she said, well, yeah, I would really like to do that. You know. So Prabhupada witnesses all that. And basically, all that rubbish talk about Freud was just enticement to have sex, you see. So that's what's going on today. They learn the Marxism, they learn Darwinism, they learn Freudian psychoanalysis, and they think they're educated. But what does it lead to? It leads to illicit sex. That's what it leads to, right? And they lose their belief in God. Because they think, oh, well, you know, if I believe in God, it'll limit me from enjoying life. I don't want to be limited. I want to be free. And what do? They try and free you from feelings of guilt by engaging in sinful activity. Right? And they say those things are not sinful. They're normal. Eating meat, gambling, illicit sex, intoxication. These are normal things that you should not deny yourself. Now, if you look at the history in the Bible, the devil was an angel that revolted against God, and he took with him other angels. Angels are like, you know, the Christian equivalent of demigods, right? And they revolt against God, and to spite God, they come to the material world. They have to come to the material world. They revolt against God. But they try and make Adam and Eve fall down from the Garden of Eden, which is paradise, right? They're supposed to be perfect male and female, and they're living in complete happiness. They don't have to work. There's so many trees there that produce all kinds of different fruits, delectable fruits. So they have everything they need to be happy. And there's only one restriction, that is they're not allowed to eat from the tree of knowledge and death. And but then what does the devil do? He convinces Eve that God is hiding a type of sense gratification that's much greater than anything else they've ever experienced. But she can only have it if she eats the fruit of that one tree that God forbade them to eat from. And he convinces her. And she takes a bite of the forbidden fruit, which was an apple, so-called, and immediately she feels shame because she violated God's one only restriction. There were no other restrictions. There was only one only restriction. Don't eat from that one tree. And there's thousands, millions of trees there, right? And they all have wonderful fruits. So, but what was the enticement? The devil says there's a type of sense gratification that's much greater than anything you've ever experienced. And she believes him, right? This shows the danger of associating with demons, because they will entice you with what you would call pie in the sky, or what they say in Hindi, Hava Mahal. There's a palace in the sky, or in English we say pie in the sky. So she falls down, and immediately she feels shame, because they used to walk around naked, Adam and Eve, and there was no shame, and they didn't have to have sex because they were immortal, right? But now she feels shame, and she starts hiding her bare parts of her body, and what does she do? Misery likes company. So she goes and convinces Adam to bite the apple also. And he bites the apple, immediately he feels shame. And then God comes and says, what the heck did you do? Why did you do this? There was only one thing I told you, don't do it, and you actually did it. You know, and he said, I don't understand, why were you not satisfied with everything I gave you? You know, and he said, now you're going to have to leave this paradise and go to the material world. And Adam, you're going to have to work very, very hard until you start foaming at the mouth. And you'll always be harassed and in anxiety, trying to make a living. And Eve, you're going to experience childbirth, which is very, very difficult and painful. And you're going to have to rear the child for, 20, 30 years. Nowadays, parents rear their children. The child can be 60 and the parents can be 90, and the child is still living with them, and depending on their income, right? So there's no respite anymore. They're always harassed. So and this was basically punishment that they had to go through, that everyone goes through. So the Christians say, we're all suffering because of the original sin of Adam and Eve. That, of course, is not true. But this whole story is allegorical. What does that mean? Look that up. Allegorical. Allegorical. Allegorical means it is an example, a history that may not be true, but it does. It's an example of the truth. Right. So what does it say?
It's a story or poem or picture that can be interpreted to reveal a hidden meaning, typically a moral or a political one.
Yeah. So the history of Adam and Eve is actually allegorical, because it demonstrates why people fall down from the spiritual world, because they have a doubt about God, and they think that maybe God is hiding something from them that's much greater than what they're experiencing. See? And ultimately, it's due to enviousness of God. When you have a doubt about a person, just like there was once two friends who were talking to each other, and one friend says to the other, I don't trust anyone, but you're my friend, but I also have doubts about you. So this is the problem in life. When you have doubts about everybody, then you become an atheist, right? Because the ultimate doubt is doubting the existence of God, and the ultimate knowledge is knowledge of God. So if you doubt the existence of God, you'll not be interested in learning anything about God. So this is what is taught in schools in a subtle way. They emphasize science and reason and logic as means of understanding the truth about existence. So there's no mention of God there, and everything it depends on the individual's ability of perception. And obviously that's going to be flawed because we have four fundamental flaws. We make mistakes, we're easily illusioned, our senses are imperfect, and we have a cheating propensity. So when we become doubtful about the existence of God, like I'll give you an example. There's one lady who was always bringing her son to the temple, but never to any classes. They would just come and have darshan and leave. And every once in a while, her son would learn bhajans, and he would sing some bhajans. So when the boy became 16, 17, 18, when he was graduating from college, he told his mom, he said, "Mom, I don't believe in God anymore." Now, he's 18 years old. When he's 6, if he said something like that, she could maybe do something about it. But he's 18 years old. She can't do anything about it now. And he stayed like that, even up until today. And there's nothing she can say to him. Now, why did he not believe in God anymore? Where before he was chanting bhajans, saying the name of Krishna, maybe even chanting some Hare Krishna, Mahamantra, and coming to the temple, but never did she or the boy listen to any classes. Right? Well, he became convinced through high school, especially middle school, and then especially high school, that there's no God. That's all a myth, and that believing in God is a type of restriction or limitation on one's experience of sense gratification. Say, so what becomes the God? It's sense gratification, and one is dictated to by lust, greed, and eventually anger and illusion and so forth. So here it says in 7th chapter, 19th verse, that in the beginning of spiritual realization, while one is trying to give up one's attachment to materialism, there is some leaning toward impersonalism. But when one is further advanced, he can understand that there are activities in spiritual life, and that these activities constitute devotional service. Realizing this, he becomes attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and surrenders to him. At such a time, one can understand that Lord Shri Krishna's mercy is everything, that he is the cause of all causes, and that this material manifestation is not independent from him. What are they trying to teach kids? They're trying to teach kids that this material world, that God has nothing to do with this material world. It has always existed. This is the way the Buddhists will deny the existence of God. They say, you don't have to talk about God because the material world has always been there, you see. So there's no real creator of the material world. Well, the scientists say the same thing in a little different way. They say, well, I mean, God is some fictitious construct of people that have weak intelligence and need this crutch. They use the word crutch of believing in a God. But the material world started with a big bang. And then because of the force of gravity, with all that stuff blowing up and going through space, eventually it formed planets, and at first it becomes a big ball of gas, and then eventually that gas develops into a planet, and then eventually there's some primordial soup, and it gets zapped on the planet, and it gets zapped by lightning, and it turns into amino acids, and eventually amino acids are the building blocks of life. That's their explanation, right? So they go from a big bang to amino acids in the primordial soup, and they zap it, and it's zapped by lightning, and it becomes a one-celled living being. And then 1 cell, 2 cells, 10 cells, 20 cells, geometric combinations and permutations of all these cells, and you get a human being. Right? That's their explanation. And kids believe it. And, they say, oh yeah, there's no God. There's an explanation here, how it all started, with a big bang. And so they don't need God. They learn to stop people's dependence on God and to think that people are independent. And the more independence you have, the happier you are. But yet, every day they see that they're not independent because they get old, they get sick, and eventually they're going to die. And they're seeing it happen all around them. Parents die, grandparents die, and friends die, and this and that. Oftentimes it's a very shocking thing when a teenager who has a lot of friends dies, and all those kids go to the funeral, and they say, "Oh, we'll never forget you. You're in our heart forever." They forget him as soon as they walk out of the funeral home, right? And they say, "Oh, he was such a nice person. His smile made everybody else smile." It's all nonsense stuff, right? And basically they're saying, "Boy, I'm glad I didn't die. I'm glad he's dead." So this is crazy. And what happens is people can go through their whole life after being indoctrinated by Darwin, Marx, and Freud, wasting their time pursuing things that have no real significance. What has real significance? Knowledge of Krishna, scientific knowledge of Krishna, that leads one, as it says here, to engage in devotional service. So it says, at such a time one can understand that Lord Sri Krishna's mercy is everything, and that he is the cause of all causes, and that this material manifestation is not independent from him. He realizes the material world to be a perverted reflection of spiritual variegatedness, and realizes, notice every time it says realizes, right? Realizes that in everything there is a relationship with the Supreme Lord Krishna. Thus he thinks of everything in relation to Vasudeva, or Sri Krishna. Such a universal vision of Vasudeva, or Krishna, precipitates one's full surrender to the Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna, as the highest goal. Such surrendered great souls are very rare. Yeah, I mean, I've asked this question, I've asked this, let's say, experiment previously, to go around, especially kids, go around and ask other kids what their goal in life is right now, that they're 14 or 18 or whatever. And most of them will say, well, I want to be happy, and I want to make money, and I want to be in IT, and or AI, and I want to enjoy life. That's it. Now, did their parents teach them that? Partially, yes. Did the school teach that? Yes. Did social media teach that? Yes. Do movies teach that? Yes. So they're being bombarded by this concept of, look, you get a good education, or you can become a drug dealer also, but you need money, one way or the other. Get the money, and then use the money for sense gratification. And there's no God, there's nothing after death, and there's no spiritual world, and you're independent. And whatever you think, that is what's right. So this type of culture is extremely dangerous. So that, and then Prabhupada continues in his purport. He says, this verse, in other words, 7th chapter, 19th verse, is nicely explained in the 3rd chapter, verses 14 and 15 of the Svetasvatara Upanishad. Sahasrasisha Purusha, Sahasraksha Sahasrapat, Sabhumin Visvato Vritva, Tyatistad Sangulam, Purusha Evidam Sarvam, Yad bhutam yachchabhavyam utam ritat vasyin sano yad anenat tirohati. So this is the Svatara Upanishad, but it's actually the Purusha Sukta prayers. And it says, this verse explains universal vision of Vasudeva. So that's what he was talking about, this universal vision of Vasudeva. In other words, that when one realizes that the material world is a perverted reflection of spiritual variegatedness, and realizes that in everything there's a relationship with the Supreme Lord Krishna. Thus he thinks of everything in relationship to Vasudeva or Sri Krishna. Such a universal vision of Krishna precipitates or leads to one's full surrender to the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna as the highest goal. Such surrendered great souls are very rare. And then this verse from the Purusha Sukta, these two verses, the first and second verse, basically says that Krishna was all that was and all that will be. He is Lord of immortality and all that is nourished by food. In other words, he's feeding everyone. Everyone is receiving food from Krishna. So he is the ultimate benefactor, because you can't have food without the sun and seeds and rain and earth, and all these things are supplied by Krishna. And therefore, everyone is eating every day by the mercy of the Lord. And also, he encompasses the whole universe, but yet he extends beyond it. He is indeed in other words, the whole universe is contained within him, and that's a fact. As the Virat Rupa, he contains the whole universe. But at the same time, he pervades the whole universe as Paramatma. So all these things are related to the science of God or science of Krishna. And then it says in the Chandogya Upanishad, this is still the same purport, it is said, in the body of a living being, neither the power to speak, nor the power to see, nor the power to hear, nor the power to think is the prime factor. It is life, which is the center of all activities. Similarly, Lord Vasudeva, or Krishna, the personality Godhead, is the prime entity in everything. So now this is a very high principle of philosophy. If you study philosophy in college, it says that there are primary and secondary qualities. The primary quality of a thing is what you can measure: its length, its width, its weight, and so forth. Its secondary qualities are like color, smell, and so forth. All right? That's the way they define it. And this was explained by the Greeks 2,500 years ago, right? And it's always being maintained up until now. But here it's saying something different. It says that Krishna, or the personality Godhead, is the prime entity in everything. So this is the difference between the material conception and the spiritual conception. In the material conception, they say that the matter is the prime, quality, and those that matter that you can measure and see and measure, that is the prime quality. And then there's secondary qualities like smell and taste and so forth. But actually that's wrong. The prime quality of everything is Krishna himself, who's present in the heart of every living entity and in every atom of the universe. There's a major difference between the materialistic philosophy and Krishna consciousness. So it says, Lord Krishna is the prime entity in everything. In this body, there are powers of speaking, of seeing, of hearing, of mental activities, etc. But these are not important if not related to the Supreme Lord. And because Vasudeva, or Krishna, is all-pervading and everything is Vasudeva, the devotee surrenders in full knowledge of Bhagavad Gita 7:17 and 11:40. So 7:17 says, Tesam gyani nitya yukta eka bhakti visishyate priyo hi gyani notyata ham sa cha mama priya. Of those persons who are interested in Krishna consciousness, the one who is in full knowledge and who is always engaged in pure devotional service is the best, for I am very dear to him and he is dear to me. So, anyway, we won't go too deeply into this, but you see, learning what is the prime quality of everything, and that is Krishna, that is real education. Whereas the speculators, they say, wait a minute, the prime quality of everything is what you can weigh and measure. That's not the prime quality of everything. It's Krishna who's present in every atom of the universe. Therefore, he's the prime quality of everything. And therefore, if you accept that, then this leads to surrendering to the Lord and becoming a devotee and engaging in devotional service. So we see there's so many obstacles to coming to that point of surrender to Krishna. You have Darwin, Marx, and Freud. Then you have modern science and reason and logic. And you have humanistic education. And so there's all these are impediments to coming to the conclusion that Vasudeva Sarvamiti, Krishna, you are everything for me. So people become very miserable by not accepting Krishna as the prime quality of everything and accepting other things that are dependent on Krishna. And therefore, one is misled and one wastes their life and never attains real happiness also. Okay, so then Krishna is not engaged in mundane sex. But yet, he's married, yet he has children. First of all, he has 16,108 wives, and he has 10 sons with each wife. 10 sons, right? And that becomes the Yadu dynasty. And then they get married, and then they have children also. So Krishna's family is huge. It runs into multiple millions and millions of children. And then they all killed each other because they were all demigods that were basically going back to Godhead because they get the chance to associate directly with Krishna. So Krishna, in order to instruct society, he lived as a grihasta also for a long time, especially in Dwarka. And there's a chapter in the Krishna book called Lord Krishna's Daily Activities. Now, I'm not going to read all of it. It's a long chapter, but I'm just going to read part of it. You get an idea of how Krishna demonstrated the perfect life of a grihasta. Because most people get married, or in one way or other, and they have children, and they have a lot of responsibilities. So now we're going to hear about Krishna and what his daily schedule was. It says, the bodily limitation whereby one part of the body cannot act as another part is totally absent from the Supreme Personality Godhead. There's no difference between his body and himself. He is completely spiritual, and therefore there is no difference between his body and his soul. Similarly, he is not different from his millions of incarnations and plenary expansions. Baladeva is the first expansion of Krishna, and from Baladeva comes Sankarsana, Vasudeva, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. From Sankarsana, there's an expansion of Narayana, and from Narayana, there's a second quadruple expansion of Sankarsana, Vasudeva, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. Similarly, there are innumerable other expansions of Krishna, but all of them are one, meaning They're all the same person, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Krishna has many incarnations, such as Lord Nrsimha, Lord Boar, Lord Fish, and Lord Tortoise, but there is no difference between Krishna's original two-handed form, like that of a human being, and these incarnations of gigantic animal forms, nor is there any difference between the action of one part of his body and that of another. His hands can act as his legs, his eyes can act as his ears, or his nose can act as another part of his body. Krishna's smelling and eating and hearing are all the same. We limited living entities have to use a particular part of the body for a particular purpose, but there is no such distinction for Krishna. In the Brahma Samhita it is said, Angani yasya sakalendriya vrittimanti. Krishna can perform the activities of one limb with any other limb. So by analytical study of Krishna and his person, it is concluded that he is the complete whole. When he meditates, therefore, he meditates on himself. Self-meditation by ordinary men, designated in Sanskrit as soham, is simply imitation. Krishna can meditate on himself because he is the complete whole, but we cannot imitate on him and meditate on ourselves. Our body is a designation superimposed upon ourself, the soul. Krishna's body is not a designation. Krishna's body is also Krishna. There is no existence of anything foreign in Krishna. Whatever there is in Krishna is also Krishna. He is therefore the supreme, indestructible, complete existence, or the supreme truth. Krishna's existence is not relative existence. Everything else but Krishna is a relative truth, but Krishna is the supreme absolute truth. Krishna does not depend on anything but himself for his existence. Our existence, however, is relative. For example, only when there is light of the sun, the moon, or electricity are we able to see. Our seeing, therefore, is relative, and the light of the sun and moon and electricity is also relative. They are called illuminating only because we see them as such. But dependence or relativity do not exist in Krishna. His activities are not dependent on anyone else's appreciation, nor does he depend on anyone else's help. He is beyond the existence of limited time and space, and because he is transcendental to time and space, he cannot be covered by the illusion of Maya, whose activities are limited. In the Vedic literature, we find that the Supreme Personality of Godhead has multi-potencies. Since all such potencies are emanations from him, there is no difference between him and his potencies. Certain philosophers say, however, that when God comes, he accepts a material body, but even if it is accepted that when he comes to the material world, he accepts a material body, it should be concluded also that because the material energy is not different from him, his body does not act materially. In the Bhagavad Gita it is said, therefore, that he appears by his own internal potency, Atma Maya. Okay, so all this is transcendental knowledge about Krishna. It's all there in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and this Krishna book is a summary Prabhupada made of the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So, without understanding the science of Krishna, one will be bewildered their whole life. This is real knowledge, because Krishna is the prime quality and the prime, essence of everything. So if we understand Krishna, we understand everything. Okay, so now about the daily life of the Lord, how he lived. In the garden within the compound of each palace, there were parijata flowers. The parijata is not an artificial flower. We remember that Krishna brought the parijata trees from heaven and implanted them in all his palaces. Early in the morning, a mild breeze would carry the aroma of the parijata flower, and Krishna would smell it just after rising from bed. Due to this aroma, the honeybees would begin their humming vibration, and the birds also would begin their sweet chirping sounds. Altogether, it would sound like the singing of professional chanters engaged in offering prayers to Krishna. Although Srimati Rukmini Devi, the first queen of Lord Krishna, knew that Brahma Muhurta is the most auspicious time in the entire day, she would feel disgusted at the appearance of Brahma Muhurta because she was not very happy to have Krishna leave her side in bed. Despite Srimati Rukmini Devi's disgust, Lord Krishna would immediately get up from bed exactly on the appearance of Brahma Muhurta. Okay? Everything he did as a Grihastha is exemplary. So if we want to base our life on Krishna's exemplary behavior, that would be the perfection of our life. And it says, an ideal householder should learn that the behavior of Lord Krishna, how to rise early in the morning, however comfortably he may be lying in bed embraced by his wife. After rising from bed, Lord Krishna would wash his mouth and hands and feet and would immediately sit down and meditate on himself. This does not mean, however, that we should also sit down and meditate on ourselves. We have to meditate upon Krishna, Radha Krishna. That is real meditation. Krishna is Krishna himself. Therefore, he was teaching us that Brahma Muhurta should be utilized for meditation on Radha Krishna. By such meditation, Krishna would feel very much satisfied, and similarly, we will also feel transcendently pleased and satisfied if we utilize the Brahma Muhurta period to meditate on Radha and Krishna, and if we think of how Sri Rukmini Devi and Krishna acted as ideal householders to teach the whole human society to rise early in the morning and immediately engage in Krishna consciousness. There's no difference between meditating on the eternal form of Radha Krishna and chanting the Maha Mantra Hare Krishna. As for Krishna's meditation, he had no alternative but to meditate on himself. Okay, so this part of the Krishna book and the Srimad Bhagavatam is explaining all about what Krishna did every morning in the Brahma Muhurta, and then after that, how he got ready to go to the political building where he would manage all the affairs of Dwarka with all his assistants. So I'm not going to read it all right now. We'll read some more of this tomorrow. Are there any questions? So we're going to lead up. We previously yesterday we discussed how the transcendental qualities of Krishna, and we discussed some of that today also, and the importance of becoming free of our false ego. Without understanding Krishna, we cannot be free of our false ego, right? Because what is the false ego? We think that we are Krishna, right? Because we make some money, or because we have properties, or because we have a 401k, or because we have a lot of sense gratification, or because we dress nicely, or whatever. We identify all these superficial things and we think that we are successful. But our real success is understanding Krishna and surrendering to the Lord and engaging our whole life in devotional service. So without becoming free of the false ego, we can never understand anything about Krishna. So before we hear about Krishna's so-called conjugal affairs with the gopis and his wives, there are his wives and then there are the gopis, we should first understand how to become free of the false ego, then understand the example that Krishna gave as a householder, and then we can understand, we're ready to understand Krishna's transcendental pastimes with the gopis. Or when we say understand, we can never understand it completely, but we get a general idea of the authentic understanding explained by the acharyas and not by opinion. And I said this before, I said, from now on, I don't try and form an opinion about anything. I rely on shastric evidence. If we make opinions, we'll go off track. And we'll stop right there. So are there any questions?
So, Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. In material world, we have like duality, like day and night, right? So in spiritual world also we have day and night, because in this purport,
Okay, everything you see in the material world, it exists in its pure form in the spiritual world. But when you become Krishna conscious, you become free of duality. Now, what does that mean? It means that in material consciousness, we are bewildered by these dualities, and the fundamental duality is the difference between the body and the soul. If you cannot see that difference, you develop the false ego, and everything you do is an illusion. There's no truth in your life because of that fundamental duality. And that's why you see duality everywhere. Happiness and distress, peace and war, riches and poverty, and so forth. But when you become Krishna conscious, you understand, I'm not this body. I'm the eternal servant of Krishna, and I have an eternal soul that's part and parcel of Krishna. Therefore, my duty in life is to always serve the Lord. That frees you from duality. You have one purpose. Duality means you can't figure out what's your purpose because right away you have a false ego. So you think, oh, should I marry this person or should I marry that person? Should I divorce this person and marry that person? Should I invest in this stock or that stock? Should I work for this company or that company? Should I go and fight in Ukraine against the Russians or join the Russians and fight against the Ukrainians? So people are confused because of the false ego. But when you get rid of the false ego and develop the real ego, that I'm the eternal servant of Krishna, then you're free of duality also, because you only do those things that please Krishna. But when you're in duality, you're trying to figure out what's the best thing you can do to please yourself, and that causes confusion in your life, right? So one time, years ago, I had a relative, and he was a very nice man. He was very successful. He had a nice wife and kids. And then I learned that he divorced his wife. And I got confused. I was trying to think, why would he divorce his wife? And he got married with somebody else. And that was like a shock to me, And there's two things that shocked me when I was younger. One was when my father died. I didn't understand what it was, what happened, right? And the second thing was when this relative divorces his wife and marries some other lady, right? And I was trying to think, why would a person do? First of all, why does someone die? And number two, why would a person do something like that, leave his wife and kid and marry somebody else? Well, these are confusing things. And why do these things happen? Well, because we are all controlled by laws of nature. And as long as we have a false ego, we're not in control of ourselves. We're being forced to do these things by impulses based on this illusion that I am the body. So until we become free of that illusion, everything we do is going to be a mistake. If the most basic thing, identifying who you are, is wrong, then everything else you do in life is going to be wrong also. And this is hard for people to understand, but it's a fact. It's just like if you make a mistake in the beginning of a, let's say, math problem, then even though you go through all the different steps, in the end you're going to fail because you made a mistake right in the beginning. Like, for example, if you buy a brand new car and when you're leaving the dealership, you turn the wrong way and go in the wrong direction, you're not going to get to your destination. That's why you bought the car, is to get to destinations, right? But if you made a wrong turn, you're not going to get there, right? So if you make a mistake in the beginning about the most fundamental thing, who am I, and you identify with the body and not with the soul and your relationship with Krishna, everything else you do in life is going to be a mistake. And you're going to be harassed by duality. you won't be able to control your mind and your senses. Right? So the fundamental duality is the difference between the body and the soul. If you don't solve that problem correctly, everything else is a mistake. Haribol. All right, we'll stop there. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Somebody sing. I have to leave early today. Hare Krishna.
Sri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma Guru Bandhu moi savadhana mate mate jahara prasade bhai e bhava doriya jai e bhava doriya jai Krishna prapti hoi ja hoi de Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chitte Te Kuriya Gya Arna Gori Ho Mani Asha Sri Guru Charane Rati Aise Uttama Gati Jai Prasade Pure Sarva Sha चक्षुदान दिलो जय जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशितो प्रेम भक्ति जहाँ हो दे अविद्या विनाश जादे वेदे गाय जहारा चरितो श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु अधम जनर बंधु लोके नाथ लोके राजीवाना हाँ प्रभु गुरु दोया देहो मोरे पद छाया हे बेजास गुसुक त्रिभुवाना श्रीला प्रभुपाद पतित पावना जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा नमो ॐ विष्णुपदाय कृष्ण पृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी निधि नामिने विष्णुपदाय कृष्ण पृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी निधि नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादिशतारिणे नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादिशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम Hare Ramo, Ramo Ramo Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Ramo Ramo, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Ramo, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. The lotus feet of our spiritual master are the only way by which we can attain the pure devotional service. I bow to his lotus feet with great awe and reverence. By his grace, one can cross the ocean of material suffering and obtain the mercy of Krishna. My only wish is to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his lotus mouth. Attachment to his lotus feet is a perfection that fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord birth after birth. From him ecstatic prema emanates, by him ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing of his character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of the mercy, the friend of the poor, the Lord and the master of the devotees. O Master, be merciful unto us. Give us the shade of your lotus feet. Your frame is prayer with all of the three words. We take the lotus.